Oh, it's wonderful to be back. I have to tell you, I was so disappointed to miss Pentecost, and I'm just delighted that we still have all the Pentecost decorations up today. And just, yay. Wow, it just looks great. Awesome. So today we heard this amazing story, the story of those poor pigs, right? I mean, of all the characters in this gospel reading today, it comes out worst for the pigs who rushed down the bank after being possessed by demons and drowned themselves. But the part of this story that really stood out for me this morning as we were reading it and as we were thinking, as we were looking at it, was the fear that was expressed. Here is Jesus, and he comes to this Gentile land across the lake. And as he leaves the shore to walk into town, he's confronted with this man who is besieged by demons. He's just wild, and I mean so wild that he has to live out, and he lives in a tomb, right? He lives in a tomb because no one will have him anywhere near them. He's just unsafe. I think we've all probably seen people like this raving on the street or something like this, and you think, oh, is it even safe to be on the same side of the street as that person? You know, I mean, not all people who are on the street are crazy or are out of their minds with fear or whatever. But when you see someone behaving that way, it's disconcerting, okay? This guy was really out of it, and it was a really disconcerting thing. He would rip his clothes, and he wore nothing. His clothes were all torn up and everything. And even when they tried to restrain him, he would break his bonds and escape. So the guy, it was not a good life for this man, and people were afraid of him. And Jesus comes up from the boats at the shore and is confronted by this guy, and he heals him. He heals him of that wildness, that bizarre behavior of those demons that possessed him, that made him a frightening visage, that made people cross the street when they saw him coming, right? And then, you know, the swineherds go into town and tell what happened, and people come out, and instead of being happy that this man has been healed, they ask Jesus to leave. They're filled with fear. Maybe it was because the pigs were killed, right? Because the pigs died. It might have been that. I don't think that's all that was going on, though. Because we see over and over again in history that when God moves in big and dramatic ways, one of the first reactions is fear. You may have heard the history of some of the great revivals that have happened in this country. There was a great revival in the 18th and early 19th century where people, ministers who were just filled with the Spirit, were going from town to town and preaching this message that God was present and acting in wonderful and dramatic ways. And some of those people, they would come into town and they would ask the local churches if they could preach from their pulpit. And that's generally where they preach from. Well, we hear about them as tent revivals now, because very quickly what happened was the established churches said no. They didn't want that kind of enthusiasm in their churches. They didn't want people acting out in dramatic ways how God had saved them, or displaying in dramatic ways how filled with the Spirit they were. And so they ended up in tents. They could not preach from the pulpits of the churches. And so we had tent revivals instead. And people would come from all over the place to be a part of these tent revivals where the restraints were lifted and joy was expressed and the Spirit was present and people were filled with God's love. And even when those tents were full, there were just as many people in the other churches who didn't go out to the tent meeting, because that's just not how we do things. We do not behave in those ways. It would be sort of like if you're in this service here in our church, our little church here, and you look over and someone has their hands up during the prayers. We got a live one in the front row here. Yeah, that's just not how it's done. Oh my goodness. But it is how it's done. And we need not be afraid of the works of the Spirit. We need not be afraid of Jesus healing those who are tormented. We need not be afraid of the action of the Spirit guiding us in community, guiding us in love. I can remember the first time I heard someone describe to me. Now, keep in mind, I was raised as a good Episcopalian boy, okay? I was raised in proper Episcopal congregations that prayed with the 1928 prayer book, and it was done just so every week, the exact same thing every week. The prayers of the people were read from the prayer book every week. Not a word was spoken from the congregation during the prayers of the people. There was no need because those prayers are perfect. Okay? They say everything that needs to be said to God every week. That's how I was raised. So when I heard about Pentecostals speaking in tongues during worship and singing in tongues during worship and standing up and waving their arms and raising their hands to God during worship, I thought, wow, that's pretty out of here. That's pretty out there. And so what I'm trying to say is that worry, that suspicion about enthusiasm in worship, it comes naturally to us. The fear that they felt when Jesus healed that wild man down by the shore, that's a fear that's familiar to us. But I want to offer you a beautiful perspective, a lovely perspective on the Holy Spirit and the action of the Holy Spirit. And what is really going on when someone speaks in tongues or sings or prays spontaneously. It isn't that the Holy Spirit takes us over and possesses us in some way. It's not the Holy Spirit version of the demon possession that poor guy on the beach was experiencing. No, it's as simple as being inspired by love. I know that one of my favorite verses, it comes from the letter of John where he says, God is love. God is love. And love inspires us. And so the question that guides us, that can guide us when we think about being inspired by the Holy Spirit, when we think about Pentecost and the gift of the Holy Spirit pouring out upon us, is what would you do for love? What does love inspire in you? And love has inspired some of the most wonderful things in all of our history. Love inspires beautiful art. Love inspires wonderful music. Love inspires care and compassion. There's no other explanation for Alice taking care of me while I was sick. She did a beautiful job of taking care of me. She must love me because she kept feeding me even when she couldn't be in the same room with me. And we did manage to get through that whole thing without getting Alice or Joan sick, so that was perfect. And thank you for feeding me for all of those days. Love inspires us to forgive, which is hard. Love inspires us to compassion and generosity. Love inspires us to take chances, to speak out and say, no, that person should not be excluded from God's love or excluded from our love because of the way they look or because of the color of their skin or because of who they love. No, we are all children of God. Love inspires us. One of my favorite things that love does is love allows us to see what is beautiful. Think about that. When you love someone and you look upon them, they are beautiful. There are mothers who look upon their children and see nothing but the most beautiful child there, and the rest of us look at it and go, oh, wow. Looks like Winston Churchill to me. But love makes everything beautiful. Love is just wonderful in that way. And so, I mean, that's the main point. That's the message I wanted to share with you on Pentecost. And so I shoehorned it into today's sermon because I didn't want to miss the chance to say it. Rather than spend a whole lot of time explaining more about what love inspires and how love inspires us and how the gifts of the Spirit are expressed in God's love, I just want to sing together. Because there's this wonderful hymn, and you learned it on Pentecost. We're going to sing it again today. It's in your bulletin on page 3. It's, I'm going to sing when the Spirit says sing. Because the Spirit is God's love poured out for us. And that love inspires us. It inspires us to sing. And then we'll repeat and we'll sing the song again. And the Spirit inspires us to pray. And then when those prayers are too deep for words, all we can do is moan and express wordlessly our love for God and for one another and our desire for well-being for the ones we love. And then we're going to shout. So please, I invite you now to stand and we will sing this song together. We're going to clap when the Spirit says clap. I'm going